CHAPTER XII of Man and Nature on the Broads by Arthur Henry Patterson. Recording is in the public domain. December in Broadland. O winter, ruler of th' inverted year, thy scattered hair with sleet-like ashes filled, I love thee all unlovely as thou seem'st, and dreaded as thou art. Thomson. December on the whole is not a pleasant month. It is generally ushered in with clouds and vapours, and stormy days are not infrequent. Now and again, towards its close, the hoar frost is scattered like ashes, or a mantle of snow covers the landscape with whiteness. On Broadland there is an apparent cessation from outdoor labour. The farmer has finished ploughing, but the feeding and housing of his cattle demand attention, whilst Hodge ' jobs about,' as he expresses it, for there is corn to be thrashed in the open weather, and grain to be carted. He will tell you that ' it oan't du, 'bor, to fold yer arms an' not to keep a doin' summat, and master's wery good that way in findin' jobs for to do.' Our old fenman friend finds scant idle time, except when the waters are hard ' friz.' Reed cutting commences now, there's hedging and ditching to do, whilst up at the warren he finds it not unprofitable to help the warrener net rabbits for an adjacent market town, and for this latter congenial adjunct his brace of ferrets comes in exceeding handy. He finds them useful too in clearing the farmer's premises of rats. Not that he altogether exterminates them, nor would he wish to if he could, for ' winter'll come round agin some day, yer know, and what's the ferrets for ?' This admission Jim Trett would not venture to make to any but a trusty friend. It is a dull, murky day, with the promise of a change, which cannot be for a much worse, that finds us turning our backs upon the quiet Broadland station. We saw little to interest us coming along. A number of white gulls, on most friendly terms with their opposites in colour, the rooks, were foraging on a fresh ploughed field. Flocks of sober tinted larks rose up on either side as we startled them into hurried flight. We might, perhaps, have observed more, had we not become so absorbed in a gossip carried on by some substantial looking country wives who have been to town to purchase their Christmas groceries. It is simply astonishing how everyone knows everybody else's business in these quiet villages. We are treated to a sample of it. Amongst other analysis, their intermarriages and family relationships are worked out in a genealogy as amusing as it is exhaustive. None too pleasant is our walk Broadwards. The roads are veritable ' sloughs of despond,' and the unpleasant drizzle which has evolved from the thickening vapours, driven by the wind, filters through the leafless hedges as we plod along. We speedily overtake a miserable object, shambling along ahead of us, and, forcing our conversation upon him, bit by bit draw from him the story of a misspent life and present destitution. He ' once ran well, but the strong drink hindered him.' It is the old story. A goodly start, pleasant prospects, success, temptation, yielding, gambling passions aroused, excessive indulgence, theft, exposure. Then in quick succession followed hopelessness, carelessness, want, and misery. Could it be possible that the unhappy rag draped specimen of humanity rubbing shoulders against our own, glad of, but unprofiting by a word of sympathy, was once in affluent circumstances, and one whom the Honourable at one time esteemed as one of them. We study his bleared physiognomy. Thereon yet linger traces of refinement and education. We query as to his wandering in such an outlandish country. ' Sir,' replies he, ' what matters it to wretched Cain whither he wanders, so long as no one knows him, so long as a crust is to be had for the asking, and a public house is looming in the distance? Alas for poor humanity! It is not sufficiently tempting to day for us to venture out upon the open Broad. The rain has ceased, and a streak of blue intervenes between the retreating rain cloud and a darker one which follows. The wind still blusters, but from the way the tell tale on yonder mill cap whirls round, and strange, harsh, grating sounds proceed from part of the unoiled machinery, we notice it is veering a point or two more northward. A pelting hailstorm bursts upon us. How keen the air is becoming! Sleet begins to mix with the lessening hailstones, and there is the promise of snow in those mountainous clouds looming up from the horizon. The sun breaks out awhile, and tinges the whole scene with a warm, ruddy hue, which is superseded by a colder yellow. From a little brick Broadland bridge we are content to take our survey of the Broads. Here in their leisure moments in the finer days, and on Sundays between church times, the natives delight to 'mardle,' resting their chins upon their folded arms on its parapets; and here they love to ruminate. We are not one whit better than they. Before us lies a Broad with a white edged ripple dancing upon its surface as the wind beats down it, flinging the froth in amongst the stems of the bending reeds. The breeze for a moment lulls, and the yellow brown reeds and rushes duplicate themselves in the depths. Decaying leaves and broken stems sprinkle the surface amongst them. The debris of the water lilies, the mare's tail, and many another Broad plant are rotting to form fresh soil below. All around and about the Broad, signs of the year's decadence are apparent. The old willow's slender twigs are bare, and the beech's more distorted branches are as naked. Lichens are crowding the tree trunks. Only the fir trees, in which the wood pigeons now resort at eventide, bear the slightest resemblance to their summertime glories. We miss the songs of the woodland birds. The crack 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 of the moorhen is only heard at intervals. The scolding of the crested grebes we listen for in vain. Most of them have gone to the milder southern counties. A few may be found in winter in our open estuaries. To day but one or two have ventured to show themselves here. They will be ready to visit salt water when the Broad becomes clothed with an icy mantle. We do not discern even a pike fisher to day. The only individual in keeping with our surroundings is a fenman cutting reeds. We bring our glasses to bear upon him. A plank pushed over the bows of his flat reed boat rests upon it, and the stumps of those reeds already cut. They easily support his weight. The process is simple, yet requires some judgment. Holding a bunch in his dannocked (gloved) left hand, He makes a slightly upward sweep with his sickle, cutting the reed stems as near the surface of the water as possible. An axiom of the Broadman says, "An inch o' reed below water's wuth two above it." That from under water, when dry, becomes harder and more durable than that which grew above. He lays them as cut athwart the boat until they form a little stack, then ' quants ' with a shoving pole to the staith, where he ties them up in bundles some 6 feet in circumference, and sells them by the fathom. When reeds were more in demand than now, a reed bed formed a profitable adjunct to the owner's property and the fenman's earnings. Pains used to be taken in propagating them. Detached pieces of a reed bed were moored in likely places, and a new growth speedily began. Now they encroach upon the Broads all too fast, extending their area year by year. The bridge we stand on spans a narrow run of water, and with the roadway trending on either side, separates these two particular Broads. The runlet unites them. Turning round we take a survey of the other. There is a sameness in the outlook. Only a grey church steeple breaks the distant line of trees, and a tiny red flag marks the mooring place of a trading wherry. A swampy rond, with a narrow footpath insinuating itself into the labyrinth of alders, tempts us to follow its windings. The bog moss is growing rankly, all else we tread on is dead and decaying. Water squeezes upwards at our every footstep, and brambles catch our sleeves with their sturdy thorns. The swamp is not untenanted. A snipe and now another take to zigzag flight as we approach their hiding places, and a long-billed bird, which we recognise at once as a woodcock, springs from under our very feet, flies wildly and in an indefinite manner overhead, and drops again as suddenly as he appeared. Turning abruptly to follow a less used pathway, we come suddenly upon a sight which fills us with interest and with sadness. Depending from a low tree branch by pieces of twine are the numerous victims of a gamekeeper's vengeance. Stoats and weasels form the greater number. We wonder not so much at this magpie, condemned to death with some degree of fairness, perhaps, for the mischief he was believed guilty of, that of egg stealing. But why this innocent barn owl? We reckon up this gamekeeper as an ignorant, unread, and unthinking fellow. Some of the stoats are mere skins and skeletons, for the blowfly was on his rambles when they were slaughtered, and the shot holes thickly perforating their necks and shoulders are a guarantee of the accuracy of the keeper's aim. Some siskins are dodging about on an alder stem, but take to flight on the approach of a green woodpecker, whose anticipations of an abundant meal, hiding behind the decaying bark upon a willow bole just beneath it, are not far out. We remain motionless. As yet the fine bird, with his yellow-green coat and crimson cap, has not espied us. At a snail's pace we bring the glasses to our eyes. How the fellow is chipping the bark to splinters! Now he has exposed the trunk to view. It is a grand time he is having amongst the ' armadillos ' that, so unexpectedly brought to light, are too stupefied to seek fresh shelter. We reach the small red drainage pump. Its sails are not revolving. A strange noise, sounding very like the rushing of wind through the pump sails we instinctively imagine as such, but an alarm cry, as of a plover, makes us suddenly look up. It was not the wind, but the rustle of 100 pairs of wings, and that cry was the wail of a golden plover. They are migrating. We observe no other birds except a dabchick disporting himself under an overhanging bank. The wind suddenly springs up and flings in airy circles the descending snowflakes. Ere we reach the village, the canopy of blackness which has been shutting out the blue above us is pouring forth its accumulation of snow. It eddies and twirls around us in the blast which whisks up the flakes already fallen, and drifts them under the hedgerows. The first that fell have melted, but the myriads following lie one upon the other, and remain until all nature is covered with a pall of dazzling whiteness. The bell in the village steeple is tolling ominously. Surely Death has not been visiting Broadland? Alas, he has, and the fair have fallen. Dong, dong. At short intervals reverberates from the ivy-clad steeple as the old sexton, at measured periods, tolls the passing bell. He has left his spade resting against a moss-grown headstone that marks the last resting place where one of the rude forefathers of the hamlet sleeps. Yawning beside this is a freshly dug grave, into which the spotless snow is gently falling, as if to carpet the bare earth with unsullied purity. There is a stir in the village. Apron-clad matrons are quietly hurrying to see the last of a little maiden whose burial takes place to day. Some have donned all the black in their possession as a mark of respect for the departed. They are making for the churchyard. In the distance a solemn procession is wending its way hither also. An old white pony is drawing its precious burden upon a cart. Over the coffin a velvet pall is spread. Snowflakes are falling lightly on it. Immediately behind follow the classmates of the dead maiden, each with a snowdrop and a sprig of southernwood in her hand to throw directly upon the little coffin. Then follow the bereaved parents and their children, and the friends of the family, of whom muster a goodly number, for half the village has turned out to pay homage to the little one, gone to the land where there is no winter. Scarce a word is spoken, and even then it is in subdued whispers. The parson meets them at the church door with due solemnity, and the procession files in slowly under the shelter of the old thatched roof, 2 or 3 old men, bent with age, and leaning upon their sturdy staves, bringing up the rear. Even they have a tiny slip of crape tied around the left arm. The church service over, the coffin is borne out and lowered into the open grave. There is a strange feeling of awe displayed upon every feature as the soil drops with a thud upon the coffin lid, and the quivering lips of the white-headed parson pronounce the well-known sentence, "Earth to earth." Sobs are heard from relatives, and sturdy fellows, holding their broad-brimmed hats in one hand, brush away a tear with the other brawny biceps. Now a sweet song is trilled by children's voices as they stand around the resting place of their lost companion. Brief life is here our portion, brief sorrow, short-lived care. The life that knows no ending, the tearless life, is there. By the time the song is ended, there is not a dry eye in the company around. Even rough Nixie Lutkins the poacher, and his sworn enemy the gamekeeper, drawn by one bond of sympathy, are now side by side looking over the low wall, and are in tears. For the time being old feuds are forgotten in the general sorrow. Poor little Nellie Goldstone was the only being who ever had a kind word for Nixie. Maybe she, being dead, yet speaketh to him. Who knows but that even now he may be making up his mind to profit by the lesson of her spotless life? The service finished, and the last look taken, the congregation slowly disperses, and the sun, peering out from behind the snow cloud that has passed over, lights up the landscape and makes the countryside beautiful, a fitting emblem of the brightness of a better world after a journey through the valley of the shadow of death. Winter now reigns supreme. Christmas, the jolliest season of all the year, is close upon us. The town is unusually busy, for everyone is making great preparations to welcome it. Even the hard-worked counterman puts up with its inconveniences, with rest and pleasure in prospect. There is an unusual bustle at the Broadland station as we step out of our carriage and worm our way through a maze of hampers and baskets of good cheer. The feet of fowls and the tails of game peep out in all directions. Is it not strange that much of our pleasure should depend on the death of the humbler creatures? Merrily ring the bells in the village steeple. Ding dong ding! It is a sorry peal, but the best the triplet of bells can do. Strong arms pull the ropes, and the sound of their clanging is heard afar. The drowsy bats among the rafters no doubt draw their heads from under their membranous wings, and wonder at their strange awakening. And the owls above them hiss and crouch at the farthest corner of their location. Ding dong ding! Let everyone be glad, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. So runs the roughly painted scrollwork some village artist has proudly tacked around the old oaken pulpit. There are lights twinkling in the church windows. The parson and his helpers are making the church bright with evergreens, befitting symbols of that Name which endures through the generations. It is not to the church we wend our way. We are off to a supper at Farmer Kerrison's. A son is "home from the army. One of his married gals is down from Lunnon with her husband, and it's a right merry time he intends a havin'." And it is a "right merry" party we find sitting down in the spacious kitchen to a table creaking beneath the weight of the good things of this life. Kerrison welcomes us heartily, and his company smile us a friendly greeting, he himself saying us a complimentary "So you've come, 'bor?" We could say much about the coquetries and gallantries of the younger farm hands, and the curious bits of broad Norfolk dispensed by the older ones, but space forbids. When grace is said, we "fall to" with a gusto that bespeaks the quality of the spread and the appetites that will speedily devastate it. First come Norfolk dumplings. We give them capitals, for they are unique. They are the simplest of puddings, compounded of flour, water, yeast, and a dash of salt. Biled 20 minutes, neither more nor less. Only Norfolk matrons can make the legitimate article. To see them knead and roll into shape between their hands nip off or add a pinch of dough, is a sight that impresses you. But to have them served up "done to a nicety," and swimming in gravy, is an episode in your existence. Our friends stow away one apiece, some of them more, and then fall to a loin of pork that would make a bilious man stand aghast. With it disappear turnips and potatoes. Next follows toad in the hole, pork sausages baked in batter. This fails to upset or satisfy. Then comes pork and apple pie, with a crust as thick as a policeman's boot sole. Then pumpkin and apple pie, and those who wish it may have their turn at rice pudding and giant custards. Lastly comes a monster plum pudding, of which, strange to say, but sorry fragments afterwards find themselves upon the kitchen table. All this time there has been much uncorking of non-intoxicants, and the ale barrel has been running itself dry as well. We bid the party good night, ere the evening's fun commences, which finishes with a merry dance and light refreshments. Strolling along in the cold crisp air, we wander Broadwards for the last time in the old year. The frost dust sparkles in the moonlight. A slight rime has touched the tree branches and the hedges with whiteness. The Broad is frozen over. We hear no sounds but the crackling of the ice and the occasional cry of some awakened bird. Once we notice the murmur of starlings roosting in the reed bed. Then all is quiet again. The report of a gun rings through the clear night air. It is a suspicious sound, and we doubt not some poacher is out on the prowl. Presently a figure emerges from a small wood ahead of us, but, as if our presence is simultaneously detected, it disappears again. Once again the man, as if reassured of our neutrality, steps out from a nearer thicket, and staring inquisitively at us, recognises us. It is Nixie Lutkins at his old game again. We had hoped better of him, and we venture to tell him so. "Ah, 'bor, what's bred in the bone 'll work itself out somewhere," he replies. "A feller can't help his instincts. Why, when I wor only a nipper, the sound of a shot 'ud just make me all excitement, and it is only with a gun in my hands that I am happy now. In spite of all it's browt me, I can't part myself from it. And why shouldn't I have some fun in life, jest as well as the rich 'uns? They abuse us for destroyin' a few head of game, they can kill 'em by the hundred. What feeds their bards but the farmer's corn, and he dussn't open his mouth to say so. Their bards? Ain't them pheasants and partridges on one man's field to day and on another's to morrow? Them as they belong to, why doan't they mark 'em? Could any on 'em swear to a bard and say as sich and sich a one were their own partickler property? If they're theirs, says I, why doan't they keep 'em at home? Well, I may be wrong, but I like the fun and excitement. The sight of a long tailed 'un asleep on a tree branch sets me all afire. All right, guv'nor, yow doan't need to feel unaisy. True, a man's known by the company he keeps, but Duke'll see as we shan't be overlooked.' He whistles, and a scraggy but faithful lurcher, which has been till now in hiding, glides up to and takes its place behind him. ' Yow'll keep sentry, oan't yer, Duke?' The dog answers by lifting a paw and wagging its tail in a cautious manner. ' Talk about dogs! Dukes has known some as must. He never sells hisself by bargain. He can trace and bring in a hare like a Christian, and he never recognised me in company, and'll even pass me in the street as if we were the biggest strangers. 'Bor, he can tell mischief a brewin' afore I can. Ah, 'bor, I have had some rare do's in my time. Let me light my pipe and I'll tell yer of one or two. I once made a good haul on yin island. It wor this wise. I knowed as how a lot of longtails were roostin' in there at nights, for I'd seen 'em flyin' over at eventime. They was snug like, there weren't no stoats nor rats or sich like to worrit them. Law, it wor tantalisin' to see 'em whizzin' over the bit o' water and turnin' in all serene. One night I watched the keeper off the beat, and slippin' my old gun where she now is, see, I got her here, half in each pocket. I nips down to the Broad. There weren't much moon, but jest enough to distinguish this from that. The Broad wor hard friz, and snow lay thick. My footmarks 'ud tell a tale, so I jest off with my boots and stockin's and rewerses 'em, stocks outside, yer know, then I wraps some rushes round 'em. Yow wouldn't ha' known my tracks from a elephant's. There they wor, snoozin' in the trees. I pops over a dozen right quick, and off I come. I hops ashore, strike off across some fields, makin' most of my way across tangled places and aside the holes, and makes for home. I found old Cubitt's dicky wanderin' in a lane. On him I jumped, makin' him trot me the remainder of my journey. To bustle him off with a kick or two as he'll remember to his dyin' day, to hang my bards in the chimbley, pop into bed, and to get snorin' wor the work of a few minutes. And none too soon nayther, for I'd hardly done it afore I heerd the slop, policeman, and keepers come in. In course upstairs they all stumped, where I wor a snorin' like a hippopotamus. Says the bobby, ' This 'ere is a rum do. Nixie's at home, and fast asleep. It worn't him.' ' 'Tis a rum 'un,' says a keeper. ' We doan't need to wake him.' And once more, clappin' the bull's eye on to me, they hooks it. Howiver, to keep from bustin' with larfin' I doan't know, and they hadn't cleared the house door afore I busts. 'Hallo,' says one, 'what's that?' And I s'pose he listens. Then he says, 'I s'pose that's the cat a wailin'.' Jest then the cat du trot downstairs, and that settles their opinions. They couldn't prove nothin', but give a dawg a bad name and hang him, so they say. The wust o' wrong doin' is that one thing leads to another. If a feller doan't lie outright to hide his tricks, he het to act fool many a one to screen 'em, and he's so tempted to act mean as well. I ha' used false whiskers, makin' myself look like other folk, and once I slipped on a shepherd's coat. I wor traced, but got away, but poor old Barney Hewitt got run in 'cause they knowed his coat. It wor only my ownin' up to the poachin' as saved him a fortnight on the staircase, for they found a couple of pheasants in the pockets when I dropped it. Mind yer, I never showed fight. I walue my neck too well. No, if I'm copped taken, I'm copped. If I ain't, I gets away. That's logic, ain't it? Says I, never prop up a rotten beam with a worm-eaten bit of timber. Once I got away when I wor took. Duke and I was out one evening on the old game. We'd got a hare. That wor afore hares were chalked as wermin. we heerd footsteps, and with no more ado we draws ourselves into a heap of rubbage, hedge clippin's, briars, brakes, and sich like, and covered ourselves serene. That dawg didn't make a deen sound. The keepers were arter us. One on 'em actually stamped on Duke's foot as he passed by, but the old feller didn't even wince. I felt his breath come quick and sharp agin my face. They passed on, sendin' Duke home, for I knowed they'd leave no stone unturned to git me. I hides my old piece beneath a heap of hay. She were rusty enough when I fetched her agin, and makes for the willage pub. They were there afore me. In a moment the slop, who'd been called in to help, had the snips handcuffs on me, and out I had to go. They thought they'd got their bird, but they hadn't. Handcuffed as I wor, I bolted. They dashin' arter me. I could run then, and for a while outdistanced 'em. Presently I trips agin a stone and comes down wallop. Luck, however, were on my side, for one o' the links were broke. Lor, how I pegged it! Well, 'bor, they lost all traces of me, and by a roundabout way I gets into a barn unbeknown to 'em, and hides beneath the straw. I'd a knife in my pocket, and by dint of sawin', by next noontime I had my hands free altogether. I got fearful hungry, but thowt it best to hide till nightfall. Then I goes round a mile or so to my brother's. He were a hawker, and put his brooms and pails and dwiles (housecloths) and cetera in a box built behind like. I begs him to see me home. So, arter a feed, he pops me in hid fust, and puttin' the pony in, off he trots. Lor, that wor a ride if you like. I had no ind of bunnies lumps on my hid when we got to the house. Once when the pony draws into the hoss pond, I jist about stands upon it. I wondered what were up. Arrived at the house, he jerks open the door and shoots me in like a bale of goods. I were laid up with a low fever for some weeks arter that, and in the meantime the affair blowed over. Just now Duke shows signs of uneasiness, and his master takes the hint. But before he leaves us he hurriedly remarks that he really intends to drop the business, 'bor,' he adds. That 'ere little 'un as were buried t'other day begged on me to do different, and s'help me, some day I mane to. But it's hard to give up the old ways. P'raps in the new year I'll turn over a new leaf, but I must ha' my Christmas dinner fust. Good night, sir.' The fellow as suddenly vanishes as he appeared. We continue our musings on the bridge alone. The keeper, for he it is whose oncoming has put the poacher to flight, accosts us, and makes comment on the beauty of the night. Feelings of delicacy on his part forbid him interrogating us as to whether we'd heard or seen anything in his way. Ding dong ding! Again peal forth the village bells, their clear mellow tones ringing out through the bright quiet night. There is something weird and beautiful in their clanging, yet so strange withal. Now for a while they cease, and the music of sweet childish voices is borne along upon the breath of the gentle wind, a welcome as appropriate as it is touching of the day that we love best in the days of the year, bringing to mind the beautiful and never tiresome story of the nativity of Him whose praises the angels sang at Bethlehem. And his presence seems so real and near to us that unconsciously we take off our hat, and the place whereon we stand seems hallowed ground. Reader, it is time for us to take leave of each other. Can we do better than part at the manger where the Holy Child lay? Our Broadland jaunts have come to an end. End of chapter 12. End of Man and Nature on the Broads, by Arthur Henry Patterson.